everybody. I just love that happy music, Heather, don't you?
I do. It gets us off on the right foot.
It really, really does. No matter what kind of day I'm having, whenever I come here to Brain Balance Live, I get picked up by that music. And then I'm so excited to be picked up by you, Heather. Everybody, if you have not watched the show before, this is Heather Wells of Brain Balance Centers. And she is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to our, frankly, all children, but we focus on our children with challenges here on the show. I have a son who has ODD and ADHD, so I come from a brain balance parent perspective. And Heather is a therapist, a board-certified cognitive specialist, and the National Autism Summit speaker. And recently, tell us of your new title, Heather.
Harding University is starting a doctoral program in organizational leadership, and they reached out and asked me to be on their advisory council, and I'm so excited.
So a big round of applause for Heather, which she would never, ever ask for or need, but I give it to her anyway, because I think she's amazing. And today we actually have a really, really amazing show planned for you guys because it's Q&A day. We are asking our questions, and Heather is going to answer them for us. Heather, are you excited about our show today?
I'm so excited because I always love it when it's interactive. I mean, everyone's welcome to always write in comments and questions on any show. It's like, let's leave the floor to everyone else and have them ask questions. Jen has a list of questions that have come in, some that she's come up with, some that I've gotten through messages, and we're going to tackle as many as we can. And if we don't get through all of them, we'll do a follow-up and answer some more.
Yes, I love it. So make sure you drop those comments in with your questions as soon as we see them. Our producer, Bess, is going to put them up on the screen there, and Heather will answer them for us. So I'll ask the first one and get the ball rolling, but please, please, please feel free to drop them into the comments. My first question for Heather is going to be, what supplements do kids with ADHD need most, and how do I make sure that they are best absorbed?
That is a great question, because we know that the body and the brain are intimately intertwined. And so when we're thinking about supplements, we're thinking about ones that really help the chemical messengers in the brain communicate well. They're called neurotransmitters. We've got to build neural pathways. We also have to take care of those chemical messengers. So one of the things that helps that is vitamin B6. And if kids are low in, and by the way, sometimes kids are low in it, even if you are giving supplements, because the brain tells the gut how to process food. You know, Harvard Medical School says the gut and the brain should be considered one system, and the gut is made up of the same cells of our limbic system, our emotional brain. So these help emotional regulation too. But vitamin B6 helps with norepinephrine, serotonin, and dopamine. All of these are often challenges in the brains of individuals of any age, including adults with ADHD. So it can impact memory, concentration, increased activity in kids or more hyperarousal mentally or emotionally in those who aren't physically hyperactive. And the way you can help absorb that better is by making sure you take it with magnesium. So that really helps with attention span, irritability. It also relaxes muscles. It helps some people sleep. And if any of you have kids out there who might have bloating, constipation, magnesium can also help with that, by the way. And off topic, but related, if you have low thyroid, magnesium can be your friend for that same reason, because sometimes the bodily processes slow down just like we get mental fog. So magnesium is really good. Vitamin C, don't overdo on all of these. Some of these, even if you take too many, your body just secretes the rest of it. But do a little research on this. But vitamin C, of course, that's good for immunity, but it also helps with neurotransmitter production. Zinc regulates dopamine. So do your kids have low zinc levels? That will definitely impact attention. Iron is needed to make dopamine. This is not something that you want to give your kids without having blood work on this one, because too much is not a good thing medically. These others are fairly safe, using common sense and not overdoing any of them. And for pretty much all of our kids, whether ADHD or other challenges, we recommend really considering vitamin D and omega-3s. Vitamin D is a hormone, and it has a lot to do with energy, mood. Omega-3s do tend to be lower in the brains of those with ADHD, and it helps with focus and memory. And I know you asked what supplements to take, but be careful about coupling a lot of these with, what is wrong with me? Calcium. Calcium blocks absorption of a lot of stuff. We need calcium for strong bones. Vitamin D is a teammate on that, vitamin D3. But sometimes you need to space out when you take these things because one can block another. Just like I said, you want to pair magnesium with vitamin B6 to help it work better. But avoid too much sodium. This isn't just for heart health, but there is a correlation between high sodium and higher ADHD index scores. MSG can cause cognitive reactions in some studies. It can be hidden as yeast extract or HVP. And caffeine, for some people, caffeine can be helpful in regulated doses to increase attention. You've got a big test coming up, but it can be addictive. And there is a higher propensity of having addictive personalities in those with ADHD. And it can lead to the fight or flight response, anxiety, because there already tends to be a tendency for that anyway. Insomnia, as you know, so be careful about taking it after mid-afternoon or even early afternoon for those who are going to bed earlier at night. And it's
sometimes when you're taking them together, I'm sorry to interrupt. When you're taking, like you said, B12 and magnesium together, we have it's a mad rush getting out the door in the morning sometimes on the way to school. So you've got maybe 45 minutes from the time they wake up to the time you run out the door. Do you find that there's a time frame that okay, after 15 minutes, I can give him the next vitamin? Or should you space it throughout the day?
I think it's a great idea to do some of these in the morning and some of them in the evening, like the magnesium and vitamin B6 are excellent to do in the evening. Magnesium can help kids sleep. There's so many issues with getting kids for their brains and their bodies to slow down enough to go to sleep. Melatonin, a lot of kids have lower melatonin if they have ADHD, and that is a neuroprotective chemical that we need. But just the other thing I wanted to say about caffeine is that it can interact negatively with stimulant medication. So be careful about that. And so if they're taking ADHD stimulants, caffeine, be very, very careful.
Stay away from it because, it's another stimulant, right? So you're kind of doubling on your stimulant.
Yeah, that's right. And we've had a lot of questions about how do I know if my child is sensitive to certain foods, so very related to your question. And what we recommend is an elimination diet. If you just take away one food at a time, see if it makes a difference. And just to clarify, most or close to all food sensitivities do not show up on blood tests. If you've ever taken your kids or yourself as an adult to go have allergy testing, it can be negative, but that doesn't mean there's not a sensitivity. And we are not talking about breaking out in eczema, having allergies, congestion as a result of a certain food. We're talking about foggier thinking, more irritability, more moodiness, foggy-headed, decreased memory and concentration. So basically the same symptoms you're concerned about in your kids, because the body and the brain aren't synced up the way we want to, it can exacerbate those symptoms. Improving the diet alone is not going to get you where you want to be. I would say that would be extremely rare. I mean, if they have neurodevelopmental challenges, they have these sensitivities because of the brain imbalance. And so you still need to take care of the root issues. But this is not speculation. It is, researchers consider this absolutely confirmed that food additives will really cause issues in a lot of kids with neurodevelopmental issues, whether it is autism, ADHD, learning differences, and so on, and sensory processing. You want to think about dairy, gluten, and sugar. And I know people have a hard time with the dairy one because we want our kids to have strong bones, and I get it. But dairy, cow milk has enormous molecules to break down. I have an iron stomach. My dad called me a pepper belly. From the time I was little bitty, I could eat jalapenos, no issues. I could eat anything. Dairy would make my stomach hurt. It is difficult on a lot of people. There are so many alternatives out there, and you can take a calcium magnesium supplement and get both of those taken care of. Find calcium in other ways. A lot of vegetables, have calcium in them also. And then gluten, that's one that I get asked all the time. Is that really a thing, or is it just a fad? The reason it's a thing, the reason you hear so much about it is because we've learned so much about it in the last few years. Just because you don't have celiac disease doesn't mean you don't have gluten sensitivity. So it's good to eliminate one food at a time, like get rid of additives first, then go through sugars and even sometimes artificial sweeteners. The research is mixed on this, but sometimes it looks to have some of the same negative impacts. Food does not cause ADHD. I want to be clear on that. Food does not cause it, but it can exacerbate the symptoms.
It's so interesting that you say that, because like we have been drinking a soda that has like, it's supposed to be a healthier sweetener, right? But I still wonder sometimes if there's like not enough research on all of these sweeteners, that you think you're doing the right thing. But I notice sometimes I'm like, they seem wired and they're drinking something that is not supposed to make them wired.
Yes. And you know why the thing is that if you look at, there have been certain sweeteners that have been studied, like, does this cause cancer? This is a different conversation.
Yeah.
In a lot of those studies, the amount of artificial sweetener you would have to consume to equate what mice were given in research studies, like nobody. It's not even possible for people to have that much. But we're talking about exacerbating symptoms, social, emotional, behavioral, developmental, cognitive, executive function, attention symptoms. That is a different conversation. And there is a lot of reason. And look at your child, because it's going to be individual. So the fact that you've noticed that means they probably are sensitive to the
find that like that's the hardest part sometimes, is remembering. Like when I document it, when I remember to journal, it's so much easier to remember, like, oh, there is a through line there. But you get so busy in the day to day and you're taking kids places, and I have 3 kids. So like keeping everybody, it's a miracle we're all like getting where we need to be when we need to be there in the first place, like, with clean shirts on. So like so like, yeah, it helps so much to like write it down. And I know you've talked so much about journaling on our other shows and for other reasons, but food journals are really great.
Yes, I always recommend journaling food, sleep issues. If your kids are having meltdowns, as an example, keep a log. What were the preceding circumstances? What was the expectation placed upon the child? What were they supposed to be doing? What was their response? But sometimes when kids have these moments, it's not from what they just ate, or the fact that just this one night they weren't sleeping well, or just the events of that day. You start seeing a pattern of they reach their threshold, and sometimes it's like 2 days after they have a crazy day. That's when it all comes out. Patterns emerge, and then it really gives you a lot of guidance.
Yes. All right. We've got another question for you here, Heather. Is it necessary to try and head off future problems for my child, or is it important for him to have that experience so that he can learn how to control his behavior?
I love this question. So this is such a good question. So I'm going to answer this in 2 parts. One is, if your child starts having anxiety and melting down, and their anxiety goes up to here, ideally you do not want to rescue them from that anxiety-provoking situation. And the reason is because we accidentally convey to kids, you're right, you couldn't handle this, so I had to take you out of it. And then anytime they're facing something similar, they remember their anxiety at the peak, and the belief that they couldn't handle it. And so then they become more avoidant. So the best thing to do, if you know what these things are, is to take baby steps of exposure. So if we talk about someone going to preschool, this applies across the board, any age, but I'm going to just randomly use an example of going to preschool because I know this was a big one. Okay, they're going to have a meltdown. And some separation anxiety shows a healthy attachment with the parent, by the way, but if they're having lots of meltdowns and moments, there's something else going on. So we don't just drop them off, leave them at school, bye, good luck to you, but we also, that's okay, you don't have to go. There are in-between factors. So maybe you walk them into the room, stay for just a few minutes the first day. The next day you walk them to the room and you don't stay. The next time you walk them up to the door of the school. The next time, but you're having conversations about it all along. And then you get to the point of, you are so brave. even though this is hard, I'm so proud of how you're being a superhero and facing it, and you can do it. And fist bump, high five, give them that reputation, live up to, but it's been gradual exposure to it. And when I took well, it's not that big of a deal that mom still walked me to the door. She just didn't stay for a couple of minutes. The next day, she still walked me to the door. She just didn't walk me to the classroom door. The next step is so small, it doesn't feel overwhelming.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to rescue in the midst of an anxiety-provoking situation. There are exceptions to everything, but in general, the vast majority of the time, that's the case. Having said that, being anticipatory is extremely helpful. Okay, so we're not talking about the middle of one. We're talking about what are we doing? And oh boy, I know how this sets my child off.
Yeah.
And so it is really good to prepare them for disappointments in advance. So let's say that every day they get to go to the park after school and play for a little bit, and you already know today they can't. You want to let them know in advance. Number one, it's not so sudden and unexpected, so that their brain has time to process it. Explain why. Kids need to know why. And it's not that I understand why some parents are hesitant to do that, because I said so should be enough reason. But kids need to understand the world, and they need to, it helps them connect the dots. Okay.
Yeah.
So talk about why they can't do it and help them come up with a plan B. Because we don't do that, wow, I wonder what else we can do, and start brainstorming about something else that means about the day that will be cool for them. You know?
Yes.
You want to, if they're going to a place where there are other adults, you want to prepare them. My child struggles with this, and these are strategies that work. That helps you. That makes your life easier, so that people aren't y'all know, sometimes people are pointing the finger and thinking, man, y'all need to lax parenting. Y'all need, if you just discipline your child, this wouldn't happen.
Yep.
Said the person who didn't have a neurodiverse child ever.
Correct.
It might be well-meaning, but what works with our precious neurodiverse kids is not the same as works with the neurotypical brain. But talk to them in advance. But plan B, teach them relationship repair, because sometimes they're embarrassed because they did lash out, they did push somebody, they did say something that they wish they could take back. So many of our kids, I mean, they go into a fight or flight, they get very reactive, and later on they feel bad, and they'll say they're sorry, and they mean it.
Yeah.
But they may not know how to repair that. So it's really good to work on relationship repair with them also.
Oh, that is beautiful. I love that. All right. We've got another one for you. I find that what I have feels like PTSD. Like I'm so traumatized from past upset with my child that I find myself constantly worrying that it will happen again.
Yes. This is such an important conversation right here. That even if, I think this will make it really clear. If sometimes parents feel bad to say, I have PTSD from being a parent. Yes, you do. And even if it's, or post-traumatic stress, even if it doesn't qualify for disorder, that doesn't make you weak. This is such an important conversation. Think about military members who have fought for our country. They come back and they are on edge. They go into sensory overwhelm, and they might sit in a dark room and don't talk to me, and wife comes in and, do you want some tea? And maybe the spouse blows up. It wasn't what she said. It's that his sensory threshold was already all the way over, and that one thing was the straw that broke the camel's back. She develops secondary post-traumatic stress. So when you have a loved one who struggles with social emotional regulation, who maybe says awful things sometimes, even about you or about the family, or even about what they wish about their existence.
Your love for them. That's what gets me. When he throws something at me that questions how much I care about him, I am like broken.
Yes. That is traumatic. And we need to call it what it is. This can happen a lot there's vicarious trauma, where you even witness something on TV, and we, especially empaths, we experience that, feel that with them. It happens a lot in the helping professions, but what doesn't get talked about nearly enough is that it can happen with parents, because you are the nurse and the teacher and of a child 24/7. So that's what this is. Some people use these terms interchangeably. They actually mean different things, but vicarious trauma, secondary traumatic stress, compassion fatigue. And so we want to treat this like trauma. We've done shows on this before. This really could also be an entire show. But I want to let you know that, yes, that is what it is. It's not just feeling that that's what it is. There's a very high likelihood that you are in a stress response. So then what happens, you know how someone who has been mugged might become hypervigilant, and because that's part of keeping us safe. And we have triggers, a sound that happened before the event. Anytime it happens, even if you're in an entirely different setting, it gets us into fight or flight because we're going to ward off the bad guy.
Yeah.
What we have to be careful of, we must work through this, because kids will pick up. If we're like, they're going to blow up again, and we start spinning our wheels in anticipation of them doing that, it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
Because we are supposed to be our kids' safe harbor, and our anxiety escalates them, and then maybe a blow up happens that wouldn't have even happened otherwise.
Yeah.
And so one thing that often parents are afraid to do is there are times to walk away. And I'm not talking about if they're in a car seat in the grocery store and you just leave. I'm talking, let's say that you're telling them to clean their room that's not clean. And you're like, well, if you don't clean your room, you lose the privilege of borrowing the car Friday night. I mean, cleaning your room shows responsibility. It requires responsibility to have access to the car. And if they huff and puff and like, you're so mean, you're such a bad parent, you know, mom, dad, the human response is that I'm going to turn around and I'm going to defend myself. What did you just say? Mm-hmm. What's going to happen? Now, the issue is not the unclean room. Now it is the awful things coming out of their mouths. And sometimes there might be this thing, I need them to know what they said was wrong, and I'm going to win this. It's human nature, right?
Yes.
And then we internalize it. But if you walk away, you have already let them know what the expectation is. We got to make sure expectations meet their abilities developmentally, not age-wise, developmentally. We've talked about that a lot. But when you walk away, and I know it's not about winning, but there is a certain psychological thing that goes on here.
Well, that's real. No, that's real. I have pride in my heart when you say something like that to me, because you want to defend yourself.
Yes. And you deserve to go. That is not the time to do it, because it is not go. You deserve to defend yourself. Go journal, talk to your spouse, your best friend, go exercise, take a walk, remove yourself from the situation. You are winning, because they still don't get the car if they don't clean their room.
Yeah.
And then what the words coming out of their mouths, 99.99% of the time, they do not mean them.
Yeah.
I think it's super important to remind ourselves of that. We talked about affirmations and how just I feel awful about myself, and then I'm like, I'm the best thing ever. Like, that kind of thing doesn't work. But how we move them to neutral and believable and then keep getting them more positive. I think it's so important for some of your affirmations to be about you as a parent, and to not filter out all the things you're doing right. Because what happens so often, especially with such conscientious parents, is you might believe it. He said that, so I must be a bad parent. What am I doing wrong? What am I not doing that I should be?
Yeah, I haven't helped him. He's still having these problems. Obviously, I am the worst mom ever.
Yes. So what are you doing right that you can really own and not feel that you're lying to yourself? Because you're doing a whole lot right. And sometimes there has been growth. Sometimes it is progress when a child is able to articulate what he's feeling, even though I wish that's not what he was feeling right now. But if they didn't have the words to put to that previously, that is still growth.
Yeah.
But they're still having issues with going into reactive mode instead of using their thinking brain. Know that when kids are escalated, they are not using their thinking brain to come up with those words. That is their fight or flight response. And it is not their logical mind. It is not representative of what they really think. And what do you think about your parenting? What do you know to be true? What you got to dig deep and not filter out all the good that you're doing and the progress that they're making, and look for those small victories.
Yes, I love that. Okay, I've got another one. As a parent, what do I do when I feel helpless, when I'm down on myself, and when I don't know what to do because nothing seems to work?
One of the things is, I think this goes back to we kind of touched a little bit on when you're down on yourself. I think we already kind of ended up inadvertently talking about that a bit.
Yes.
But when you feel helpless, the most important thing, and y'all hear me say this all the time, is behavior is communication. What is the context and what is the meaning behind the behavior? With neurodiverse kids, behavior means I am facing an expectation that I don't think I can handle. I'm overwhelmed, whether it's sensory-wise, whether it's I got a bad score on math, so I'm just stupid. So why even try? And then they opt out. Look for meaning. That's so important. That journaling, that logging things comes in here. You want to talk to your kids, but instead of saying, come on, let's have a talk, which can feel very threatening and very, it doesn't feel comfortable. It feels like
I'm on the spot.
meeting. It's like we're going to have it, like if you're going to an interview, that's, even if you're excited about a potential job, it's nerve-wracking, right?
Yeah.
Look for those moments. Look for those pockets of time. Car rides are such a great time. Or when they're relaxed and, just look for those little moments and make it fun, whether you go outside and sit on the swing while you talk or grab some nachos, their favorite snack. But we don't want to, we want to listen. It's this conversation is not about solving problems, which is what we tend to want to do. How can I make this better right now? We are just listening and gathering information. What are their intentions? What are they feeling? What are their thoughts? When you think about they're slamming doors and they're yelling, what kinds of responses are you having? Most likely, that is a window into how they're feeling. And they might be expressing it physically and taking it out on the door. Now you have more information. You talk to them, ask open-ended questions. Tell me what's going on. Now, for some kids who don't have the complexity of language that they need, you might have to narrow the focus a little bit. Tell me what's going on with math that has you feeling this way. But the more open-ended it can be, but non-threatening, you want to talk to them as you would a good friend.
Yeah.
Slower speech, fewer words, fewer gestures, even lowering the tone, the pitch of your voice conveys calm.
Yeah.
And then you can start moving into collaborative problem solving. A lot of times behavior will improve simply by seeing that, wow, I feel more understood now. My parents really care. And when you share times where you have felt similarly and what you did to work through it. But look for the patterns. What is the context? Think about their developmental stage. Think about, wow, okay, these are expectations that she consistently has difficulty with. She's hitting puberty, so there are bodily changes going on.
Yeah.
When you have a context for it, it doesn't seem helpless because it gives a direction.
Yeah, I love that. We have a follow-up question here. And this is maybe it has a complex answer, but it's a simple question. Is crying in front of your kids bad?
Kids need to know that their parents also have uncomfortable emotions, right? Because if we talk about being a safe harbor for our kids, but that does not mean that I am super joyful all the time, Because what that tells kids is then something's wrong with me. I'm broken because I don't feel that way all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, based on a lot of research, it is believed that if you are mentally, emotionally healthy, you probably have uncomfortable emotions about 20% of the time. That's a lot because it can be sadness, disappointment, frustration, irritation, overwhelm, even though you are a joyful person and you have a wonderful life. That makes you human. All feelings are there for a reason. They're communicating to us. There's something we need to work through, think about, give a nod to, because it will flow through us. So if you cry in front of your kids, it's good to say, I'm feeling sad right now. And depending on what it is, if you want to share a snippet of what it is, if it's appropriate, I'm going to honor this feeling. It's here for a reason. And then I know I'm going to be okay. That way they're not worrying about you. But they see, everybody gets sad sometimes. This is such a teachable moment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they're going to be more likely to come to you and share when they're feeling anything other than just the emotions we all tend to want, the comfortable ones. Right.
Yeah.
So communicate to them. Yes, I'm sad. You're growing there. And emotional granularity, if you have a different word for what it is, use it. I'm just trying to make this broad right now.
No,
But
yeah, we're putting it in a nutshell, everybody. But if there's any topic that you're seeing that you're like, oh, I really would love to have this elaborated on, please drop that in the comments as
yeah,
well. Like, say more about that.
right. Yes. We have to encourage discomfort tolerance, because discomfort intolerance is what causes so many kids to opt out. Task avoidance. I don't like this, so I'm not going to do it. I mean, life is full of discomfort. There is an amazing book about the upside of your dark side. And dark side, it's a catchy title, but it doesn't mean like demonic. It's talking about discomfort that we all have.
Yeah.
And talking about how we all slept just fine for all these years, and then no, we have to have memory foam. Nothing wrong with this stuff, but just, oh no, I can't get up to turn on the TV or the lights, so let me clap and things happen, and my little computer here will turn on my light. All of those things are modern conveniences, but think about the fact that kids really have, if we have brains that are working properly, we get that they're modern conveniences. They're cool, but that doesn't mean we expect life to always be comfortable. Some of our kids really don't get that.
Yeah.
We have to think about overtly teaching them about discomfort tolerance, and in normalizing emotions of all kinds. And it's what you do with them. It's not the emotion itself. It's learning how to deal with them and to help you grow instead of causing chaos.
Yes, I love that. All right, we've got another one up. What are some differences in maintaining healthy relationships among adults versus maintaining healthy relationships with your kids?
Good question. There are some similarities. I know this is asking about differences, but I will say, like, know your child's love language, know your spouse's love language, your friend's love language, quality time, good communication. There are a lot of similarities there, but there's a different nature of a relationship between a husband and a wife. Even though in the United States, it's very much about independence. I mean, healthy relationships are interdependent, and you lean mutually upon one another to get your needs met in a healthy way. We can never have kids feel that our well-being is resting on their shoulders. That is too large a burden to bear. Know that the prefrontal cortex, where we have our highest layers of critical thinking and emotional regulation, those continue developing into the 20s. And so they cannot handle certain things. They're not going to have this. We need to be growing these things all along, but they're not going to have the same amount of emotional intelligence and emotional granularity. The perspective, understanding gray areas. It's not this is right and this is wrong. There are shades and degrees of things. There are situational factors that come in. Theory of mind, my ability to put myself into Jen's shoes and consider things from her standpoint. There are so many layers of that development. So if I say to my spouse, I feel da-da-da when you do this, that spouse has the capacity to step into my shoes and say, wow, I can see how she feels that way. And I need to redirect that because that wasn't my intention.
Yeah.
We say that to a child who doesn't have that ability. It's, I'm a horrible person because I made my mom feel this way. So I'm just a bad person, because they may have difficulty separating what they do from who they are. So it has a lot to do with development, but there are a lot of commonalities. We need that one on time. We need to grow these layers of communication, but they are not going to be there yet on so many of the social emotional skills required for the types of communication you have with a significant other.
We so often forget how long it took us to develop into the human we are now. We just want them to be there, I think. Sometimes I'm very impatient.
Well, it's hard. And the other thing is, in so many ways, kids in today's world are growing up faster than we did. They're exposed to, like, the information age, they're exposed to good things faster and not good things.
Yeah.
They know certain things way earlier than, in my humble opinion, I think they should. And so then we forget that within one child, especially if they're struggling socially, emotionally, behavioral, academically, attention, they can be a 12-year-old tween can be an 18-year-old in some areas, a 10-year-old in other areas, a 4-year-old, a 15-year-old. you have all these different areas of development inside one body, and those don't communicate well together.
No.
If you watch a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old playing catch with one another, they're on 2 different playing fields, right? You're throwing the ball too hard. You can't even catch it. I don't want to play with you. A child who has all of these areas of strength and struggle, it's a clash. Yeah. And that's what leads to a lot of these issues we're talking about.
Oh, yes, this is so, so true. All right, our next question. How important is exercise for neurodiverse kids, and how much should they get, more or less than average? Is recess at school enough?
I wish all schools still had recess, and they don't.
Yeah, that's wild. That's wild.
And even when they do, a lot of times it's 15 or 20 minutes if you're lucky, 30 minutes. Yeah, and we pretty much know that kids across the board need a good solid hour of movement a day.
Okay.
Across the board. There are going to be individual differences with neurodiverse kids. And if they have hyperactivity, a lot of fidgetiness, in addition to the physical activity, you know, there are some really good fidgets. A lot of schools and stuff are a bit less resistant to some of these fidget options than they were when they first came out, because some of them were extremely distracting to other students. But now there are even necklaces that might have a fidget on them where somebody can just do it right here and it doesn't make noise, but it calms. There are a lot better options. You're still getting some sensory motor input. You can wrap TheraBands, those stretchy things that you can use for lifting weights. You can wrap those around the legs of desk chairs and have them pull against that. You're growing body awareness. It's very regulating, and it's still getting rid of some of that energy. But all kids need a minimum of an hour. There is a ton of research about how much outcomes it can grow. There have been some studies where students in reading programs had gone through reading programs for 6 years. They instigated movement, and within months, they were totally where they need to be, and when the other thing hadn't worked. But we know that even developmental coordination disorder or dyspraxia, motor planning issue that may not be obvious, they can look athletic. It doesn't mean everything's wiring and firing the way it's supposed to in sync, is super tied to ADHD, dyslexia, other reading challenges, math struggles. The cerebellum, the motor center, the only reason for the longest time that scientists believed that the cerebellum was responsible for balance and coordinate, like movement and nothing else, is because technology had not advanced enough to see the front of the cerebellum. Did you know that? No. And so when technology grew, all of a sudden they realized, holy cow, this is for attention and memory and problem solving, and movement impacts every single cognitive function we have, including emotional regulation. Emotional regulation is cognitive. 200 million neurons in our cerebellum communicate back and forth with all the other parts of the brain to help control them. So, and I'll tell you one other thing.
Well, it is important.
I'm sorry, this is not known enough. You know?
No, it's really not. It's really not.
And my nerd is totally coming out right now. But
no, I love it. Oh, please, we love your nerdiness. Give it to me.
The cerebellum takes up 10% of the capacity of the brain, and it is involved in 75% of the functions. But really, on one level or another, it's involved in all of them. It improves all of them. So you cannot move it's just, especially in our digital age, screen time. That is one of the reasons why we have an epidemic of some of these challenges that we're facing right now, is because when I was growing up, we didn't have computers. We didn't have cell phones. You know, I was in college when that was something the wealthy had in their cars, and it was in this book, and you could get good resistance training picking it up though.
Giant, it's like a walkie-talkie basically.
Yeah, it just replaced the cans with the screen. I was in college when that happened. Yes, that's how old I am. But anyway, we were out moving, climbing trees, playing sports, running. When you're running, you're giving your body information. Sensory motor is what grows neural pathways in the brain. So please exercise. It doesn't mean screen time is evil, though.
Well, good. It's good that you say that, because that's our next question. Screen time. Is there a difference between TV and a tablet, a video game and a TV show? If our children show an aptitude and skill for video games, is there any way to let them play more and have it not affect them badly? And is that different from my neurotypical kids? Because they are going to throw it in my face.
You can, I have screen time guides if anybody wants that, but you can also go to the American Pediatric Association, and really 0 screen time is recommended until kids are 18 months to 2 years old. I would say 2 years old, except if you want to do FaceTime or something with grandma, because then it's social engagement. But then as they get older, we can handle more, starting at about 15 minutes a day and then up to no more than 2 hours a day are the general guidelines for teens, but just gradually working it up. But not all screen time is created equally. And I think this is super important to talk about since this past year has involved more screen time for a lot of people.
So much. Like, you're just like, listen, it's the lesser of the evils right now because we're all in the same house, cooped up, and no one's left, and we are on each other's nerves. So it's like, yes, please just go play the game.
But get them involved in things. Of course, if they're doing school online, that is not the same thing as playing video games. They're learning. But what's happening, I've seen a lot of this. I had a meeting on Saturday with a family, but there's been a lot of these where typing on a computer, like if you're a good typist, you're not even looking at your fingers when you're typing. So it is not using hand-eye coordination, visual motor integration the same way as if I'm writing and using my eyes to watch what I'm writing. There are skills that are suffering, and then that impacts reading. And the automaticity of our writing predicts the quality of what we write and the amount we can write and our proficiency in reading years down the road. So we still need to use our fingers in the old-fashioned way, but school is not the same as vegging out in a computer doing nothing, like just watching videos or getting into chat rooms, that kind of thing. If they're interested in crafts and they get on here and there's something they're doing, they're building things, they're using creativity, problem solving, there is imaginative play on there. If they are having one-on-one time with their friends, that social connection is very important. Also know though that if they're taking classes online, they are more likely to get distracted because there's this thing of knowing, like, I'm being looked at. Even though in class somebody could look at you, I'm on a screen, so it kind of feels like you're on TV and people are watching me. Yeah. And so then they might start looking at themselves and, do I have a smudge on my face? Do I, whatever, and not be paying attention. So know that as well. You kind of just miss some of the vibe of being in person. But what they are doing on screens matters. And when we did the distractibility show, there's traction. Is what I'm doing gaining traction, or is it a distraction? Screen time is not distracting us if it was in the calendar and that's what we plan to do. It was our free time. If I'm supposed to be doing something else and instead I got stuck going through my Instagram feed, then it's a distraction. It's taking you further away from your goals. Yeah. But the nature of what they're doing on the screens does matter. But what we have to be careful of is if they're doing video games all the time, there's this artificial ding, 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 you scored points and let's throw a balloon party. It's short bursts of attention spread out over a long time. And the feel-good chemicals, the dopamine release, then school doesn't produce that. Yeah. This is boring. And boredom is registered as stress in the brain. And then my emotional brain, my reactive brain controls my behavior. So what you do matters. Do anything in moderation, it does not need to be for 4 or 6 hours a day. And it does matter unless it's school. And then they're still using their brains. Yeah. And it's the world we live in right now for some school districts and some families who feel better staying at home. But it's not an all or nothing. But if schoolwork doesn't live up to the excitement of the video game, then it skews what I can find novel and interesting.
Oy. Okay. All right. So actually, what you just said, you would think might stress me out a little bit, but actually comforted me.
No, I would think it would, because it's not like we talk about limiting screen time and we mean it. Screen time cannot take the place of moving your body. Yeah. We need a sensory motor experience, but not all screen time is evil. What they're doing and the amount of time they're doing it, and is it distracting them from what they're supposed to be doing? If it's scheduled in because they got their other stuff done, then it's not a distraction.
Yes.
But it does matter the nature of what they're doing.
Yes, it does. And I love that it's not necessarily like, obviously we have our boundaries. We have these numbers to try to keep us honest on any given day. But there's like a hierarchy of, well, this is valuable, so we're going to allow it, and you make those decisions, risk reward every day for everything, really. So it actually just kind of gave me like guidelines that helps me put all that in perspective and make good decisions,
Yeah. I mean, I'm a realist. We live in a digital age. Please do not let your kids spend hours and hours on screens and not do other things and not move their bodies and not get sensory experience. But there are valuable things they can do online that will grow their brains, but they still need to use their sensory system and their motor system. They still need to engage one-on-one, not be looking at that during dinner time. We need to have time where the screens are put away and we are not distracted and we're having quality time.
Yes, I love it. You know what, Heather? I think I got through all of those questions.
Okay.
You have answered them so brilliantly. And, again, if you're watching this on the replay and you want to drop more questions in, we're hoping to do more of these. So please ask away. And this is a reminder, parents, to put your questions in the comments. Heather's going to get to it.
Yes.
Yes. I love that.
We'll keep an eye on that. And I appreciate everyone who reached out and has asked questions. I've gotten quite a few messages in the past several days, and I love that. So I hope this was helpful.
Yes. You have all the phone numbers there. Please follow Heather at the Hidden Churn, as you can see there. She is on Insta and Facebook. And also, are you doing another show this week with Dr. Brian?
Yes. This is Autism Acceptance Month. And last week we talked about understanding what kids' behavior is communicating, really in general, but a little more about kids on the spectrum. And this week we're talking about how to really cultivate it. It's like part 2, how to cultivate their communication in the right way.
I love it. Well, as always, Heather, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen. And thank you everyone for watching. I hope you have an awesome week.
Yes, we'll see you guys next week.